Tony, can you tell me first, say your first and last name so I have it on tape?
I'm Anthony Fierimonte.
How do you spell your last name?
I was born Antonio Luigi Giuseppe Fierimonte. My mother thought I was going to be the Pope. She was mistaken. Anthony Fierimonte, Fierimonte.
And tell me about your folks. Your dad did what?
My dad, Pasquale Fierimonte, worked for the city of Detroit, the Department of Street Railways, which was the bus line, streetcars and the bus line.
What was his job specifically? What would he do?
He was a mechanic, and unfortunately, one of his jobs was grinding brake drums, were made of asbestos, and that's what killed him. He died of it. But I got to tell you a story about my dad. When he retired, it was in the 60s. He retired and got a job somewhere else, and then he retired again. But he wanted a new house, and he informed me that because the city of Detroit hired him and gave him a job for all those years, what he's going to do is build a new house in Detroit. So in the 60s, he built a new house in Detroit. And he told me, son, you're a policeman now, and you got to do exactly the same thing. You got to live in Detroit. So I bought a house about 8 blocks from him in Detroit. And he was so dedicated to the city, it was amazing.
I'll bet.
Really, really nice.
What age was it where you thought, I want to put a badge on? When did you become?
Well, I went to Pershing High School, and I got so many tickets from speeding and stuff. I really said, boy, I'm in trouble. And there was a police cadet program that you could start at age 17, and then you worked in different police stations and downtown and headquarters, and you answered switchboards and bank alarms and all kinds of stuff that came into the switchboard. And I says, well, maybe if I became a police cadet, I'll quit getting all these tickets. But my buddy's father worked in a cruiser called the Big Four, and there were 3 plainclothes officers and 1 uniformed driver. And he told us stories about the Big Four, and they had DeSotos or Buicks, while all police officers had Fords. So I thought, boy, this is great. So that's really what, it was Mr. Jepson, I remember his name. And I applied for the police cadet program, and I made it. And I started at 17 in the police department.
Wow.
Right out of high school.
Now, you took it very seriously, because I saw you were first in your class when you...
Yeah, I was. It's scholastically. And that was a lot of fun.
Why was it so important to you to achieve like that?
I wanted to be the best at whatever I did. And I said, if I'm going to be the policeman, I got to tell you another story. So there was an Italian inspector, Pete DeLuca, and he used to live with my dad in a rooming house. And he said to me, what precinct would you like to go to? I can send you anywhere you want. And I said, it doesn't make any difference. And he sent me to the 10th precinct, and I worked the area where unfortunately the riots started. But I said that, and so therefore, that's where I ended up.
Describe the city at that time. What was happening?
Oh my God, great. It was the biggest single-family residential city in the United States of America. And there were probably between 1,400,000 and 1,600,000 people at that time. It's so vibrant. And the black community came in Detroit, World War II, because there were jobs here in the factories and stuff, and that's how Detroit became a terrific city to live in. And I just loved Detroit. It was great. J.L. Hudson's downtown, the toy department on the 12th floor. And we'd take the streetcar down there. And it was just a great place to live.
What was the department like? Was it becoming more integrated at that point?
Really interesting, because I actually became a police officer in 1962. And they just started integrating cars. So having gone to Pershing, where half black and half white, I didn't understand this integration as being a problem. Yet a lot of white police officers really fought it. They didn't want to be part of the integration. Some police officers quit. And I just didn't see any problem with it. So we got integrated, and it was a slow process, and, but it worked. It worked because later in the '67 era, the federal government started having civil rights classes for police officers. Plus, the Law Enforcement Assistant Act, LEAP, started paying for college if any police officer wanted to go to school. And then, when you went to school, they taught police service in the community and race relations, and slowly it broke the ice. And I was so excited. I signed up for the first class, and I went for 16 years till I got my doctorate. And I really appreciate the federal government, what they did. And it was just wonderful. And that really helped break the ice for the police department.
And still in this city, there were dark sides where you needed a vice team, and you kind of gravitated towards that, didn't you?
Yeah. What happened, I had about 40 or 50 days on the police force. And a Sergeant Gus Cardinelli pulled over one day. I was walking the beat on 12th Street, no prep radio, by myself, no problem. And he said, "Hey kid, you want to go undercover?" I couldn't believe it. I'm 40 days on the job. I says, "Absolutely." So he took me under his wing, and he says, "Show up, you're gonna be arresting prostitutes, going at the illegal gambling casino, Blind Pigs, where the illegal liquor is sold, and you're gonna do that kind of stuff." And oh my God, I went home, I just jumping up and down with joy. So it was just great. We worked every other month, 9 at night to 5 in the morning. And then for days we looked for numbersmen. You know what numbersmen? Oh, numbersmen, it's just like when you go in and play 3 numbers. Well, it was illegal then. And the people would go around, say, "You want to bet today?" And they would give them a quarter or 50 cents, and they would bet 3 numbers. And then at a certain time, based on horse races, they would calculate different horse races and come up with a number. Now the number was the mafia number. It was the Italian community ruled that. They ruled it for about probably 15 years, but halfway through that, there was the black Pontiac number. And there was a black number and a white number. And the numbers were different. It was supposed to be the same scenario. I think when too many bets came in on a certain number, they changed it. I don't know. But anyway, that was on the day shift. And on the night shift, we did the other thing. And it was really exciting.
Was there a bigger crackdown when Kavanaugh came into office?
No. I got to correct something. Every precinct had a quote cleanup crew that did this type of thing. Liquor enforcement, beer and wine stores selling to minors, Blind Pigs. Every precinct had one, white community and black community. It wasn't singled out for just the black community at all. And I got to admit to you, working in the black community was twice as much fun as working in the white community. And I'll tell you why. Because as we made these raids and stuff, they would go along with it. And they say, "Hey, you busted us. This is it." You go into the white, and then I did eventually go into the white community and do the same thing. And they always had a friend who was a judge and a police commander or lieutenant, and "You can't take me in. It's going to be the end of my life," you know. And I said, "What BS, you know? It was much more fun in the 10th precinct." And that's the true story, you know.
Can you explain a blind pig? What did that mean? Would you know the origin of the name?
Yeah. Oh, it started during Prohibition because you couldn't get booze anywhere. So people, I don't know how the word started, blind pig, but that was the nickname they gave it in the Prohibition days. And this is what was happening with Detroit, which really kind of, it was the Baptist ministers, especially the black Baptist ministers. They were all tight with any administration that was. Kavanaugh, Cobo, who was the Italian mayor? Mariani. And what they would do, they would say, hey, you gotta stop these people from going drinking all night, and we're the church. And so they made sure all the bars closed at 2:30, liquor quit being served at 2 o'clock. So you got this element saying, this is it, come to church tomorrow. Then you got this element saying, I'm not ready to quit drinking, I want to have some fun. I always wondered what would happen if the city would have allowed bars to be open till 4 or 5. Las Vegas, of course, does, some other cities. Florida allows, you buy a longer license, you can stay open till 4. But they did, the Baptists were strong. So you had this dichotomy. And so we were told to enforce the law, and that was the law. You couldn't do anything in that venue after 2:30 in the morning, and you had to be licensed. And now a blind pig, you could mostly to sell liquor. Then a step up, there was prostitutes, and you can go in a room and do whatever whatever you wanted the prostitute to do. Then there would be dice tables, and you would gamble. And you could do all that stuff in a blind pig. Anytime somebody took a cut of the money, it became illegal. And that gave us the right to break in to rescue the undercover officer that was inside the place. So we would give him, after we saw him walk in the door, we'd give him 5 minutes to make a wager or buy a drink and see the guy accept money, see him take his cut, a gambling table, take his cut, and then we would raid the place. And it was from 62 when I started to the riot, the night of the riot, July 23rd, 1967. Yeah, a crowd would gather when we made a raid. It was something to look at, but we never had a problem. But the country was getting tense, and things were happening all over. And a lot of the black community was unhappy what was happening because they felt they were segregated and they couldn't get employment that they wanted, and they were stuck in the apartments that had been cut up, and one apartment became 2, and there was just a few people had air conditioning in the hot summer nights, and they would go out on 12th Street and Linwood and Dexter, and they would go out to see what's happening. And it got out of hand.
You sent in 2 officers into the one that happened in 67?
Yes. We had a Sergeant Art Howison who told me he would kill me if he ever saw me again. He was a relief sergeant. He was a patrol sergeant, but he was filling in for the night. I was the crew leader, and we had 2 black officers, Charles Henry and, my mind just went blank.
That's okay.
So, Charles Henry and, I'm not going to tell you ever. Joseph Brown.
All right.
Charles Henry and Joseph Brown. And Charles Henry ended up becoming a commander, and he was a really, really nice guy. And I don't know the career of the other officer. Sergeant Art Howison stayed in patrol, but I got to tell you a side issue. So now Congress calls the police commissioner in Detroit, I'm guessing Ray Girardin, but I'm not, no, it wasn't Ray Girardin. Anyway, the police #1 guy, he was an appointee. And Sergeant Art Howison went with him to Washington, D.C. to testify in Congress. And Sergeant Art Howison was really clever. On the way back, I believe on a train, he asked the commissioner if he could have permission to live out of the city, because at that time, nobody could live out of the city, police or fire. And he gave him permission. So I was always, I was wondering, what if I would have gone, oh, I could be living on a lake somewhere in a cottage, But anyway, he was a fine sergeant, and all the guys were great, really great.
They went in. What was the queue that you guys could come in then? Did you have wireless?
I had an informant, and the informant, he would give me stuff, you work with informants, and you gave him breaks because you got a barter. And he says, I got a hot party going on tonight at 9123 12th Street. 12th Street, just north of Clairmont, 2 buildings, upstairs. And so I got together with Henry and Brown, and I said, hey, let's give it a try. You go down there and see if you can get in. They did, and they couldn't get in. So then they came back, and I says, you know what? Wait till some beautiful ladies go up to the door and go in with them. Sure as heck. They got in. So then it was real simple. All we had to do is wait 5 minutes. They knew they either do it or come back out, And they actually were able to get up there and make an illegal buy. And so I says, hey, this is easy. We're going to break the door down. So we went out and we did just 4 or 5 of us, because we had no problems with blind pigs. And we couldn't get the door down. We couldn't break the door down. And now they have all those, well, we didn't. And the fire truck happened to come by. It says, you want to borrow our axe? And I says, no, you do it. And they were able to break the door down. So we went up these tall flight of stairs, and we go into the room. We expected 15 people, 20 people. There were 85. 85 in a room that fit tops 40. And we went in and announced police, everybody calmed down, it's a raid, da-da-da-da-da. And they started throwing cue balls at us. There was a pool table. So I grabbed my police officers to pull them out of the opening into the hallway, and other blacks held onto the black police officers. You're not taking anybody to jail. They meant well. Anyway, we got them out there, we closed the door, and they started throwing things out the window. Chairs, throwing cue balls, and they drew a crowd. So then we had a prep. I think we had a prep by that time, prep radio. And I called for a paddy wagon, to take the prisoners in. And I says, I think I'm going to need 2 or 3 paddy wagons. I says, there's a fight in there. I can hear them fighting. And the dispatcher says, we don't have enough personnel in the city, honest to God truth, I can't believe this, to send you the paddy wagons. We had 204, I learned later, we have 204 police officers working the whole city of Detroit, 1,600,000 people. And we had 5,000 police officers at that time. But it was a weekend, I don't know, and all kinds of people got time off. I don't know. So they had a special patrol force. These are people just out of the academy that are being trained. And the sergeant in charge of the patrol force heard my calls, and he came with the men. And then the cruiser, remember I told you about the cruiser? They pulled up. And a crowd gathered, and somebody broke the back window out of the cruiser, the Buick. Great looking car. And it got out of hand. We finally got paddy wagons, and we loaded the paddy wagons and took them into the 10th precinct which was brand new on Livernois and Elmhurst. Brand new police station. We were at Joy and Petoskey before in a building that was built around 1900. So this was such a nice improvement. And I told one of the police officers, go into the deli on the corner and call us on the phone every once in a while and tell us what's going on. And I go into the police station with the prisoners, and Lieutenant Ray Good, I'll never forget this guy, loved him, older gentleman, and I says, boss, you better get out there. There's a big problem brewing. And he said to me, Fierimonte, you're always exaggerating. Every time you do something, you exaggerate. I says, boss, I'm telling you, go. He says, you know what? I'm going to 5 o'clock mass. I'll stop out there and take a look, but you know, Tony, I'm wasting my time. Half hour later, he comes in, he's bleeding from his forehead. Somebody threw a stone at him. Fierimonte, I'll never talk to you again. What did you do, you dumbass? What the hell's going on? Anyway, he then started the ball rolling for MO4, which means calling all police officers in. A huge crowd had gathered, and they started to break into the stores. Now, what was interesting, I consider it a riot. I don't consider it anything else, because unfortunately, they broke into black businesses, they broke into white businesses, they started stealing everything out of the stores, and then the mayor was notified, and he went out there with Senator, God, who was it? State Senator. I think he's still on the, still a state senator.
Levin?
No, it's black senator.
Yeah.
And Conyers.
Oh.
Could have been Conyers,
sure.
I'm almost positive. And they gave the order, don't shoot, be cool, just let it go. That was the order they gave them. And word got out. Word got out, and suddenly there's 50,000 people on 12th Street just helping themselves to everything. I think part of what they said was okay, but part of it was not, because people started dying. They got into a fight in a meat market, looting the meat, and they hung one of the guys on a meat hook and killed him. And then at Seward and 12th was a liquor store, and while they looted the upstairs, some guys went down to get the cases of booze downstairs, and the guys upstairs put the place on fire, and everybody in the basement died. And that it really started to escalate. And the most, I'm jumping ahead a little bit because this was a 14-day situation. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but picture this. When the fire department came out, they would shoot at the fire department. So on Linwood, and I have pictures of this for 1/8 of a mile. On Linwood, they were breaking into the stores on Linwood, and then they would set the stores on fire. And then they would go down Pingree to put the stuff they've taken into their homes. Now you got to understand, this is very important. This was maybe 10% of the people in the community. You know, this wasn't everybody. I mean, all kinds of blacks came up to us. Oh, all kinds of blacks came up to us and says, please help us. And 10% of the rioters easily were white. It was a festive occasion, but it was deadly. Then every single house on both sides of the street for 1/8 of a mile burned to the ground. And I have the pictures and everything. And it was just mind-boggling. Now I want to lighten this up. So 2 guys stole a month's TV with a stereo and a radio. These were real long. You probably got them in the museum here. And they got into a fight, and one guy split the damn thing in half, and the other guy called the police. So that was the easiest 2 arrests. ever made. Another thing, they went into a carpet store and stole a ream of carpeting and put it on the roof of a Volkswagen. And all 4 tires splayed out. And it was just funny and tragic at the same time. Now you got to remember, the majority of the black community wasn't involved in this. But then you got to look at it another way. They were destroying the stores in their neighborhood that they had to shop in. And a lot of people in the neighborhood, it was a poorer neighborhood, didn't have cars. And they had no place to shop to. And this, for years after this, all this fire and everything. And until I became an anti-sniper, working 12 midnight to 12 noon, and I got that silly police car that I loved with no back window. And we put a piece of plywood under there, and we put a Thompson submachine gun on the trunk. And we were supposed to shoot back at the snipers. Trust me, I couldn't hit anything with that machine gun. If I had thrown it at them, maybe I would have hit it. That thing danced all over the place. It was a 45. And it was a joke, you know. Then a company called Stoner lent us weapons that could go through brick. And they brought in a special squad dressed in all black, and they would go, and somebody shot out a window, they'd shoot back. 47 people died during the riots in 1967. But what really stopped it was not us. The state police couldn't stop it. The National Guard couldn't stop it. The 101st Airborne came in from Vietnam, and they brought tanks. And the tanks went down the street. And I only have one story about the tanks that I was involved in. We had somebody shooting out of a church steeple. And we were at Davison, Woodrow Wilson. And south was the church steeple. We could see the flashes. And the guy opened the lid on the tank and said, "Block your ears." And he shot the steeple right off the church with the gun. And once that started happening, and there was, you know, a military in there, and they treated it very aggressively, everything stopped. Now, if I can go aside for a minute, there's something else to think about. A year later, unfortunately, Martin Luther King got killed. And the instructions from the police department, I was 28 when that happened, was to take enforcement action immediately. And within 2 or 3 hours, everything was stopped and nothing happened. There was no problems. But for the first 2 or 3 hours, they were looting on Grand River. And everybody's coming home from downtown Detroit out Grand River to the Redford area, and everything stopped. So, you know, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. Do you go back and say, well, we should have done that, you know? But Kavanaugh was feeling for the community, you know, and they were suppressed. And they had problems with jobs, and a lot of it exists today, unfortunately. You know, it amazes me that there isn't even good bus service to the suburbs so people can take a bus and get a job in the suburbs. A lot of people would like to do that. Now, I know Detroit's making a comeback, and I love it. And the community, it's going to be strong and great. But it's going to take time. I went on I became an adjunct professor at Wayne State University, and I taught police service in the community, and I taught some race relation classes. And when they put my name on the syllabus, they would say police officer, and I'd get 98 students. Because what police officer could say anything about race relations? We had a ball. We had a ball. We did a lot of role reversals, and all kinds of really neat things. And it was so much fun. And when I got my doctorate, I had retired, and I started helping troubled police officers. I worked with a psychiatrist in St. Clair Shores. And then, when the patients would not show up, because police officers have a tendency to not show up because they don't want to deal with the problems they have, I started investing in real estate. And that became my third and final career. And I have a Fierimonte Street in Clinton Township. We built a couple hundred condos, and I was a small partner, 25%. And shopping centers, built a restaurant called Tony Pepperoni's, and retired from there and moved to Florida. And now I buy condos on the Intercoastal, fix them up, and I sell them. I'm on my 29th one.
Wow.
I did volunteer work in Broward County, Florida, which was really, really nice. It was in a major crisis situation. I worked with the families of the deceased. And I'm also on the pension board for the city of Deerfield Beach and 3 other organizations. I don't want to bore you to death.
No, you're not.
But I'm 74 years old, and the police department was the greatest job I ever had.
Wow.
Really the greatest.
Tell me, oh, go ahead. A bit more about when the tanks rolled in. What did the police department feel? What was the feeling that this massive military force was coming in? What were you feeling?
Great relief. Really great relief. It was, we couldn't handle it. I mean, it's just, you know, sporadic shooting, and you're driving down the street and suddenly somebody's shooting at you from a window. And they came in. Now, there was a Lieutenant Bannon. He retired as, I think, a deputy chief. And he could hear radio communications between people. The Panthers, you remember, have you ever read about the Panthers? So there were groups in there organized to do the shooting and everything. And I always wondered, what did they think? It's the end of the world? You know. Now, the flip side of that, there was some police officers, I know one that got fired, who thought it was going to be the end of the world and we were going to rule the community with, you know, all force. And so, but the Black Panthers were a big issue with the sniping. Let me look at my notes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good. Let's talk about once the tanks came in. You said you saw the one steeple get blown up. You were
Yes.
actually out there.
Yes.
What did you see that they were starting to just calm down at that point, or what?
It really calmed down quickly in a matter of, I think, 3 or 4 nights.
Wow. And then what happened? How did?
Everything got back to normal. It just ended. And that's how that happened that way today. They just end. You know, the Rodney King thing in California, they do $3 or $4 million worth of damage, and then it ends. And did Rodney King deserve to be beat up that night? You know, it's up to the courts. That's a court's decision to make, not a policeman's. And that's how it goes.
Was there a grudge by the police then because of what had been happening?
Yes. After the '67 riots, there was a grudge. And that's when the federal government came in. And there was some great reports, the Kerner report on the riots, and all kinds of instructions of how to quell, how to improve the relationships between the police department and the community. Now, I got to tell you an interesting story. When Coleman Young became mayor in 1974, the black community was 70% of the population, and in the police department, they were 30% of the population. So, I mean, something to think about. And I had the honor of working for Deputy Chief Frank Blount, who's deceased now, and he became one of my best friends. And he wanted to make that right. I proposed to him and the mayor at a meeting that we hire, they were laying off at Chrysler Corporations in '74, the gas crisis and everything. I says, let's go after the black community, those people working at Chrysler for 5, 10, 15 years. Let's hire them as policemen. I said, you know, they got a proven track record and everything. And the mayor said, it was his call. I got elected by the people of the city of Detroit. And I don't care if somebody was arrested once, let's lower the qualifications, let's hire the people off the street. That's the people who voted for me. And I always think that was a problem, because why not go for the best? But he felt, we're going to hire black people that live out of Detroit. Should we do that? Shouldn't we do that? And he made it clear, we're not doing that. And we got involved, I got involved, if I can go from, I got involved in the Boston busing. Judge DeMasso ruled that they had to cross district in Detroit. So they sent me to Boston with Deputy Chief Frank Blount, Sergeant Vivian Edmonds, and 2 other officers. And we talked to the police department there. How did it go? What problems did you have? And one sergeant that was on a one police officer that was on a motorcycle between buses as they were being cross district, somebody threw a brick out a window, and it didn't hit him, but he died of a heart attack. And so the Boston Police Department was up in arms a little bit. But, you know, Boston is segregated. The Italians, the blacks, and the Irish, they're segregated geographically because there's water between the neighborhoods, and there was a third way. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I went up to an Irish superintendent. I mean, he was like #1. And I says, how do you feel about blacks being cross-district into your schools in your neighborhood? He says, blacks? We don't even want the Italians. I thought, this is great for when, well, you know, when I teach college, this is going to be great.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it was a great response, you know, and it just brings back a lot of memories.
I'll bet.
Yes,
What happened right after
well,
the riot?
They decided that they had enough of me at the 10th precinct. And I don't know why. So they sent me to the 15th precinct at Gratiot and Connors. And there, oh, I gotta stop for a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
So my mother was from the old country, and my dad. And my mother didn't want me to be a policeman. So I told my mother, because I took business in high school and I knew how to type, I'm a clerk in a police station. Oh, bless you, son, bless you. You have this wonderful job. Don't go outside. Don't get, you could get hurt. You can get hurt. And then the riots broke out. You know, I should spank you like I used to when you were young. But I got transferred to 15th precinct, and I worked plain clothes. I was a patrolman still. I applied for a job as chief of police of Clinton Township, Michigan, and I came in #2. And there was an inspector in the police department that didn't get accepted, and nobody could believe it. But anyway, I didn't take the, you know, I had no choice, But interesting how I didn't get the job. There was a black constable working the black community in Clinton Township. This is a good lesson. And they says, he's been there forever. We're going to become a police department. Would you make him a police officer? And he's really good with the community. And I had been reading managers associations on police departments and how to organize and everything. I says, yes, I definitely would, but he's got to pass the basic test. And I didn't get the job because of that answer. They wanted me to say, of course I'll make a policeman out of him. What I should have said is, yes, let me train him, let me talk about he should pass the, let me work with him, and we can get him through once he qualifies. I made the wrong answer, and they told me why I didn't get the job, and that was why. They hired a police sergeant from Grosse Pointe who ended up stealing from the property room, where evidence is stored. He lost his job. But I then applied for chief of police in Lighthouse Point, Florida, and I came in number 1, 300 applicants. I was a lieutenant, and I came back, and I told them I'd accept the job, and I hired an attorney to do the negotiating. Calkins was his name. And they started calling me at the Detroit Police Department. I was head of staff for Deputy Chief Frank Blount. And somebody cut out an article in the Sun Sentinel, sent it to the chief that I had accepted this job. And Frank Blount got wind of it. Oh my God, between him and my mother, you can't move, you can't leave. You got 2 sisters here to take care of. This is terrible, how can you do this? I says, Mom, come to Florida, it's a great place, You'll love it down there. No, you can't go, you can't go. I turned the job down. But I got 2 more promotions from Coleman Young. I became inspector and then a commander. So I was number 3 out of 5,000 men. That wasn't bad. And, but there was a lot of commanders, it's not. But I went to the 15th precinct, and suddenly they asked me if I wanted to work white rackets, cleanup, morality, or whatever you want to call it. And I said, sure. But it wasn't as much fun like I said previously. Everybody, you can't do this to me, I'm important. I'm this, I'm that. And, but I did it there, and then I was sent to research and development as a writer. And I stayed there a year and a half, and I became a detective and got transferred to the 5th precinct. Then 3 months later, I became a sergeant. You had to take tests for this. And sure enough, they put me back in morality in charge of his crew. And then I became a lieutenant and got in charge of special operations, which included all that stuff. And then I went to work for Deputy Chief Frank Blount. Then I went to the FBI Academy. I did 3 months there, Session 112, they call it. That was an honor. And that's about it.
How about the police department itself in '67? Did you see a big change? You mentioned all of this stuff coming from the federal government to kind of change the mentality.
It was a very slow process. Very slow process.
What did you see?
When affirmative action started, they would take an exam, people would take an exam, and you were an officer in the first 10, and they would pick an officer that was 40 and promote him over you. It became embitterment, really, And Frank Blount used to always say, I got all my promotions by being on top of the tests, and I earned them. But the mayor had a point, because we got to get supervisors of the black community as supervisors to even up the scorecard, because every time somebody called the police, it was all white. So there, it's a trade-off. And it was a slow process. Let me ask you a question. What do you think of the police department now?
tough for me because I'm from Saginaw. I don't
Oh,
follow
are
this
you?
close. Yeah, yeah. But
It's-
I've got family members that are officers, and yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, so I guess I'd be a little more jaded. Do you think that it could have been done different? Would you have done anything different during that blind pig or during the time that you were there?
Well, we made a raid. A crowd gathered like always, but suddenly they started breaking into windows and stuff and stealing, and they never did that before. So how can you do anything different? You know, when we made raids after that, it was totally different. There were, you know, a lot of police at the raid, and we didn't even have uniformed policemen. We made the raid. There was nothing to it. It was nothing to it. It was just a, you know, hey, you're drinking, you got caught, you're running a blind pig, you know, and we would normally take the engagers to court, the ones running the place.
A lot of the same faces then? Would you see a lot of the same people?
Yeah, mostly in the numbers rackets. You'd see a lot of the same people. And I was working with a guy nicknamed Harry the Horse, and we caught a guy with stashing numbers and money and stuff. And he says, hey, you can't arrest me. I know Harry the Horse. He was talking to Harry the Horse. Stuff like that, you know. And we had great cooperation. Remember, all of our information was coming from the black community. So they wanted these places closed down because they couldn't sleep at night. And it was in residential neighborhoods. So, with the exception of the one on 12th Street, but still there were houses right behind it, you know.
You know, the people might think riots are inevitable. You know, you look at what's happening in Ferguson. What are your thoughts on that with people, all the studies you've done?
You know, that's a good question, and that's one I don't have the answer to. I really don't. Now they're saying that a Ferguson Police Department is too white, you know, but how many black citizens applied for a job to be a policeman? That's another way to look at it too, you know. So, and can you pass the qualifications?
Do you think the police are under fire? Do you see that, that it once every kid wanted to be an astronaut or a cop or a firefighter? Do you think that's true today?
No, not at all. It's dangerous. Not because black or white, because of dope. You get people on drugs and they need a fix. I mean, they kill you. Even though you start to give them the money, they're so jittery, they'll kill you. And that's the biggest problem. You know, forget about race. In Detroit, the crime is high. Flint is higher, right near where you live in Saginaw. And it's the drug issue, over and over and over again. I always wondered if we would legalize this stuff in some kind of orderly way so they can get it, would it really make a big difference and stop a lot of these crimes? It's an interesting issue.
Tracy mentioned when I first started talking about you that you came to the museum and said, I started the riot. I mean, is that, how do you fit into all of this? What do you feel?
I was sitting at home looking through my scrapbook for the first time in 10 years. And I says, I wonder if anybody would be interested in hearing my story. And I went to, I forgot where I went. I was talking to somebody and he says, go to the Detroit Historical Museum. They're really down to earth and nice people, and they'd like to hear it. So I called, and I talked to Adam Lovell. And suddenly they were interested because they were going to do this presentation in 2017. And I met them with Joel Stone. And we talked for an hour till they got sick of me. And they says, we'll get in touch with you.
Why do you think it's so important to preserve this piece of our history?
Well, to learn from our lessons, of course. That's always the case. And we got to put these civil disturbances all together and come up with a way to put a stop to them. Because at the end result, nobody wins. Nobody wins. Communities are destroyed, businesses are gone, and nobody wins. And that's why I'm here, you know?
What did I miss? Is there anything else? I mean, what's the number one thing I can't miss when we tell this story? What do you want? I guess you kind of put it in a nutshell right there.
Yeah. Don't forget the comedy part, because there was a lot. Oh, I got another one, but I don't think you want to tell it.
Well, let's hear it. I'll be a judge of that.
There was African antiquities place, and they broke in. And as I'm running down the alley after one of the guys, he turned and threw a spear at me. And I still have the spear. Of course, it was funny at the time, but I felt sorry for the business owner. They had destroyed the place. And it was a black-owned business, you know. So.
It's hard to put any kind of, I guess, any kind of reason to a lot of that, isn't it?
No, it is. And all the fires, you know. Well, the fires have been a big thing in Detroit. At least the day before Halloween, it's kind of subsided, you know. So, and everybody loves this new mayor. So I think if he tears the burned out houses down and look at the Renaissance in the Grand Boulevard area in downtown, and it's exciting, you know.
So you think something was learned in '67?
Well, it never happened again. Never happened again. Wait, let me knock on wood.
That's awesome.